Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Today's the day the NFL draft begins, and we already know who number one is going to be, but what about number two? And just how many quarterbacks will fly off the board tonight? Meanwhile, the Heat shot the lights out at the TD Garden, and can Aaron Rodgers handle not having the Zach Wilson safety net? Can the Jets find him a piece to make them Super Bowl contenders? Today's episode brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
It could be one of the most unpredictable drafts we have seen in a long time. We expect 4 at least quarterbacks to go in the first round, could be 6. We expect 3 receivers to go in the top 7 or 10 picks. Could be craziness that we see on Thursday night. Keith Sanchez in Detroit from Locked On NFL Draft. And Keith, what is the storyline that you are going to have your eye on once Roger Goodell says, hey, we're on the clock, let's go?
It has to be pick number 2, right? I mean, we know Caleb Williams. Everything seems like he's going to Chicago. So the draft starts with pick number 2. Is that the smoke screens? Is that the rumors, right? Whether it be Jayden Daniels or Drake Maye or even JJ McCarthy for all the betting people. I know they're paying attention to the betting lines, and they have been all over the place, Peter. So it's definitely where the quarterbacks will go. And I'll say this, past pick 2, there's probably about 7 to 8 teams that could afford to improve their quarterback situation. It would be fun to see which teams miss out on the quarterback. I think that would be fun because that can mean you'll be picking in the top 5 next year, right, if you don't get this quarterback situation figured out. So I'm definitely paying attention to that.
As you were going through and trying to project what was going to happen, what did you find was the most difficult thing for you, whether it was, trying to peg receivers to their landing spots or stack these corners, these pass rushers, trying to figure out what teams, like what was like, man, I can't figure this out?
Yeah, it does. If I look at it, when is the number 1 defensive player going to come off the board? Because if I look at my big board, right, my first 12 to 13 players are all offensive players, meaning that's grade by grade. So looking at it, trying to see when is the first defensive player going to be off the board, and primarily, is it going to be an edge rusher or a corner, right? A lot of Dallas Turner smoke right now, and you have to think that some of that is linked to the 40 time, right? But if you watch the film, I'm about to say Talise Fuag, Laitu Latu and Jared Verse are very talented edge rushers also. And then you look at the cornerback situation. Hey, does Nate Wiggins 40 time boost him to be cornerback 1? So I think that the first defensive player off the board should be a very intriguing storyline for people to pay attention to.
If there is going to be a player or a position group where you think teams are going to be actively trying to move up, that's not quarterback, what is it?
Probably offensive tackle. I go offensive tackle. I think they'll try to move up because I think teams are going to identify what they believe to be their guy at the end of the day, and they're going to want to move up. And I think that mid teams, right? You talk about the Las Vegas Raiders, you talk about the New Orleans Saints, who have proven to be very aggressive in trades. Right there, that I think you need to watch out that they could be trying to move into a top 8 to top 9 if a player like one of these top tackles, Olu Fashanu, falls a little bit past pick 7.
Where do you think the cliff is at offensive tackle? We expect Joe Alt to be a top 10 kind of pick. JC Latham has been getting top 10 buzz. You mentioned Olu Fashanu. Troy Fautanu may not be a tackle for everybody. Talise Fuanga may not be a tackle for everybody. Amarius Mims is an absolute space alien at 6'8", 340 with movement skills. Where do you see the drop off?
Yeah, I think that cliff is right about offensive tackle, offensive lineman, 7 or 8 for me, and that's right around the Amarius Mims, Tyler Guyton. Those are the guys that have high-level athletic traits, right? But you still have to evaluate them for, the parts that they need to improve in the development perspectives. And for me, Amarius Mims, all of him being 6'7", 330 pounds, there are some things that he needs to work on in the run game. So I would definitely say right around that. And if you project that out, that's probably pick 25-ish is where you start to, with the offensive tackles and the interior offensive linemen.
Interesting. Pick 25 belongs to the Green Bay Packers, who might be in the market for an offensive line. Keith, as we do this again tomorrow, because Friday is going to bring a whole new set of challenges and excitement for players, rounds 2 and 3. What is going to be the storyline? Like we get set up, we're talking before rounds 2 and 3. What is going to be the thing everyone is talking about that surprised us from round 1?
That they left some really talented wide receivers off the board. I think the NFL is going to overthink this. I think I think Xavier Legette probably going to fall to the second round. And I think 2 to 3 years from now, we're going to be looking at it and say that they're probably 2 of the most talented wide receivers in this entire draft.
Be in the know on who is next in the NFL by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On NFL Draft on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the Heat even the series with the Celtics before taking the series to South Beach. Before we get to that, the Lions handed out $162 million in guaranteed money yesterday. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. You can also combine the prop bets into a same-game parlay for an even bigger payout. 3 potential top 10 picks in tonight's NFL Draft dominate Rookie of the Year odds. FanDuel has Caleb Williams at plus 350, but 2 receivers not far behind. Marvin Harrison Jr. is 6-1. Malik Neighbors is 7-1. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? If you ever have to turn down the volume with all the shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Detroit Lions locked up Amon-Ra St. Brown and Penei Sewell for a long time and for a lot of guaranteed money, like a whole bunch of cash. St. Brown will get $77 million guaranteed, the most ever for a wide receiver. And Sewell will get $85 million, the most ever for an offensive lineman. The focus now moves to quarterback Jared Goff. It is a peculiar turn of events to see a team prioritize non-quarterback extensions, but both of these players have been a huge part of the Lions' rise to prominence. Now it's time to do the quarterback extension. We'll see what that one looks like. Bengals edge rusher extraordinaire Trey Hendrickson has requested a trade.
Bengals defensive end Trey Hendrickson, well, he wants a new deal or he wants a trade. Hi again, everyone. I'm James Rapien from the Locked On Bengals podcast, and Trey wants to get traded or he wants a new deal despite agreeing to a 1-year contract extension last July. And that's why this is so weird. This is why it's such a bold decision by Trey Hendrickson, because he's under contract for the next 2 seasons. He's set to make $14.8 million this year, $15.8 million next year. And while no one would debate that Trey Hendrickson is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, I think it's pretty clear after a 17.5 sack season, he doesn't really have any leverage. And so there are reports saying that he would consider retirement. Okay, well, then you're going to miss out on $14.8 million. I don't anticipate the Bengals doing much of anything with this trade request. I expect them to do exactly what they plan to do in the 2024 NFL draft, and that could include adding a defensive end, but that likely would have included a defensive end anyway. So, Trey, you're probably going to have to play for the Bengals this season unless someone completely blows them away with a trade offer that they can't refuse.
Reggie Bush. It's been a long time coming. He finally gets his redemption.
Maybe the Heisman Trust took the line from Kyle Ford. Says, my bad. I was tripping. We apologize. I guess it's better late than never, right? Maybe these guys, maybe the NCAA will get their act together. I don't know. It's a great day to be a Trojan. Today, extra special. Like I said, what's a better way to wake up? Dome blows up. Reggie's getting his Heisman back.
Back on the NFL contract front, the Ravens are showing faith in Rashad Bateman.
It's a move, and we haven't heard the particulars of the contract at the time of this recording. Maybe we'll hear them by the time tomorrow's show comes out. We'll do a pre-draft episode on draft day, so that'll be exciting. The rumblings is that it's right in the $5 million range. That would shock me. Be a great move for the Ravens. I mean, essentially you're extending his rookie contract a little bit. There was a lot of conversation, though, about the fifth-year option and just kind of what that would mean for the Ravens, for Baltimore. But for a guy in Bateman who has a ton of potential but hasn't necessarily lived up to it, right? We've talked a lot about, well, what if he can do this? What if he can do that? We've seen the flashes. We've seen him burn guys on routes. We've seen him catch some big touchdowns in some big moments, but the injury history has been there. Some of the drops as well. It's just all these things combined that hasn't let Rashad Bateman do the pure breakout thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So
the Heat were double-digit underdogs for game 2. Don't tell them that, though.
They let Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum basically get what they wanted, and they negated the supporting cast. They really took everybody else out there. Sam Hauser, who was such a huge factor in game 1, well, the entire Boston bench scored less than he did in the first game. Payne Pritchard wasn't really much of a factor. They didn't get the kind of supporting output that we saw from them for most of the season. And in game 1, Drew Holiday struggled. Derek White, although he caught fire a little bit in the game, unfortunately, that made things a little bit more tight than Miami probably would have preferred. He wasn't really much of a factor for most of the game. And just Miami's constant picking up of the pace. We talked about this. I remember saying specifically catch and shoot opportunities. It seemed like they didn't have any at all in game 1. Well, they were just letting it fly. As soon as that ball was swing, it would wind up in Haywood Highsmith's hand. Tyler Hero, Caleb Martin, Niko Jovic, they were just shooting it with confidence, and those shots fell. Again, as you pointed out, a franchise record. Great adjustments from Eric Spoelstra. The shots were falling, and Miami played a really good game, and of course, it led to an incredible victory.
Yeah, it was Cinderella ball. That was exactly what we talked about after game 1 is, hey, that whatever you did in game 1, like the zone defense, trying to get it in the mud, that's not going to work with these guys. It does not work with this Boston Celtics team. They had to play Cinderella ball. And I said, you've got to outscore. You got to outshoot the Celtics from three-point range. You got to take more threes than they did. They took 32 threes. The Heat took 43. The Heat made 23. The Celtics made 12. That 30-point margin that favored the Celtics in game 1 from beyond the arc flipped in this game. The Heat outscored the Celtics by 30 points from beyond the arc. And when you talk about adjustments, David, I think Eric Spoelstra's biggest adjustment was cosplay as the 2018 Houston Rockets. That's essentially what this team was. I have not seen this Heat team for the last 5 months. Everything that the Heat have been for the last 5 months was different tonight. It was exactly like those old Houston Rockets teams where they just used math to their advantage, and it worked. And you'd think about it in this roster without Jimmy Butler, it has great three-point shooters. They leaned into Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Nikola Jovic, who's a 40% three-point shooter, Jaime Jaquez and Caleb Martin catching fire at a timely game, at a timely point where they had been struggling a little bit with their three-point shot. So all of that stuff happened. And defensively, they took the zone away. Another adjustment that you and I called out. Like, if you wanted to have a prediction of what was going to happen in this game, just listen to the last couple episodes we did going into this one. We're not really ones for like victory laps like that, but man, did we call it.
Stay up to date all year on the Miami Heat by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Jets admitted defeat with Zach Wilson. It probably doesn't affect who they're going to take at the 10th overall pick, one iota. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime, and the scoreboard, it's not looking good. You're feeling low. Not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep. You lift your head up and you say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone, anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. For starters, Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Sounds pretty fun to me. Charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put your game face on, and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. They may not be the first team you think of when it comes to intrigue on draft night, but there's always intrigue in New York. There's always intrigue in an Aaron Rodgers team sitting with the 10th overall pick. Could they move up for a weapon for Aaron Rodgers? Could they stick and pick and be the Brock Bowers team? Could they trade down? What should they do? John Butchko from Locked On Jets joins me now. And John, you have not had a shortness of things to talk about when it comes to this team over the last year plus. What do you think is the big question that the Jets are going to try and answer at number 10?
I think they're going to make a pick on the offensive side of the ball. And I actually have to disagree with you. It's always entertaining when the Jets are on the clock because the Jets are a team you never know what they're going to do. And I mean, they do some ridiculous things when they're on the clock in the draft. I think they will go on the offensive side of the ball. Now, look, again, it's the Jets. Last year, nobody mentioned Will McDonald when they were talking about who the Jets would draft. I did not mention the name Will McDonald once on Locked On Jets before the draft. And I felt like maybe I was underprepared. And then I have a friend of mine did a Twitter search of last year leading up to the draft. There wasn't a single mention on Twitter of Jets Will McDonald anywhere heading into the draft last year. So that came out of nowhere. So with the caveat, the Jets can do anything. I think the smart money is that the Jets are probably going to go on the offensive side of the ball. And, it could be a pass catcher. You just mentioned Brock Bowers. There's been a ton of buzz about Brock Bowers the last couple of weeks. I think the Jets would love it if one of the big three receivers fell to them. Now, I don't think Marvin Harrison's going to fall to them. I don't think Malik Neighbors is going to fall to them. I think if one of the big three falls to them, it'll probably be Rome Odunze. The other option would be the tackle position. And look, the Jets, I think, did as well as they could this offseason addressing their tackle spot. They started the offseason without a starting tackle, either the right or the left side. They got Morgan Moses back, who had been with them in 2021. They signed Tyron Smith in free agency. Well, both these guys are 33. Smith has a very extensive injury history. 8 straight years he's missed at least 3 games. And neither of them signed past this season. So the Jets don't have a starting tackle at either spot for 2025. I mean, these were both stopgap moves. So talk about the short term. It'd be nice to have a young blue chip prospect to step in because they're probably going to need to play a backup tackle this year. And in the longer run, this team does not have a starting tackle past this year. So that's something they need to address.
Yeah, unfortunately for the Jets, in the long run, everyone might be fired if this doesn't work this year. So they are in the precarious position of having to draft for the right now. John, if you were in the room with Joe Douglas, with Robert Saleh, presumably Aaron Rodgers is on a Zoom somewhere, what is your advice? Who are you saying, hey, this makes the most sense for the Jets, understanding we don't know who's going to go in the first 9 picks?
Yeah, I mean, my advice, which is they won't follow for the reason you just laid out, I would say trade down because they're without a second-round pick this year. They did not have a third-round pick last year. 2026, they've already traded away their third-round pick for Hassan Reddick, which might be a good move, but you can't keep having these draft classes short on day 2 picks. So I think that they should look to trade down. I think they need to look, they've pushed the envelope so far to the present that, it's okay to think a little bit about the future. That's how I view it. It's like, we're not, this team is all in. This team is the ultimate win now team. It's it's okay to do one thing to think about your future. That would be my advice. I don't think they're going to follow that though, for the reasons you laid out. It's an interesting question because in a neutral setting, if all things are equal, I would probably lean towards taking tackle for the reasons I laid out. Both I think it's both a short-term move and a long-term move because the short run, they're going to have to play whoever that third tackle is this year. And that guy's going to be important because Rodgers is 40 and he's not going to be able to move that well coming off an Achilles injury. So he's going to have to play more confined in the pocket than he has at any point in his career. So it's really important to protect him. But I don't think all things are equal. I would love a Odunze. I like, unless Joe Alt falls, which won't happen, I don't think. If you're talking about the second tackle versus Odunze, I'd probably take Odunze. But once you get past Odunze, I'd look at tackle. I understand the hype around Brock Bowers, but and he could be great. And if he's as good as people are hyping him up to be, then it would be a great pick at 10. The problem is historically, tight end's been a difficult position for the league to scout. There have been a lot of tight ends who have been hyped in recent years as the next great tight end, and they've all fallen short. And the guys who end up being great, Travis Kelce was a 3rd-round pick. George Kittle was a 5th-round pick. You want to go back to Gronk, he was a 2nd-round pick. Antonio Gates was undrafted. I just think in general, the league has a really tough time scouting this position and projecting how guys are going to be at the next level. And it's one of those things where, I understand like everybody loves Brad Bowers and there are legitimate reasons to think he's going to be a great prospect. But the question is, have the Jets like found like have the Jets cracked the code on this? Like how to scout a tight end where like this has eluded the league for decades? I kind of doubt the Jets are the team that's like figured out, I would think something out before everybody else. So I would lean away towards drafting Bowers. So I guess like I'd be good with it. I think there are a lot of really good tackle prospects. I like the receiver prospects a lot. I like Bowers, but just based on what we know, I feel like the receiver or the tackle is probably a safer pick.
Stay up to date all year on the New York Jets by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Jets on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And finally, women's sports are getting an even bigger platform. iHeartMedia and Deep Blue Sports Plus Entertainment announced Tuesday that they are launching the Women's Sports Audio Network, the first ever audio platform dedicated strictly to women's sports. The Women's Sports Audio Network, which will be free, is set to include podcasts, sports reports, and feature athlete stories on and off the field. Incredible to see the expansion of women's sports coverage, though we will continue to do it here on Locked On Sports Today. And of course, don't forget Locked On Women's Basketball. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, who will make the biggest trade of the first round of the NFL Draft? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.